For the audience experiencing Einstein on the beach for the first time, the opera's juxtapositions of music and image are often unexpected. In the universe according to Albert Einstein, when anything moves faster, time itself slows down. Wilson and Glass emerged from the New York art world in the 1960s. Their collaboration began at a time when music theater was at the center of experimentation in the arts.
I grew up in a theater that was not based on a literary tradition. For example, it would never occur to me to take a play and set it to music. Well, in fact, a lot of operas are done that way. Butterfly was done that way. The Shakespeare operas of Verdi were done that way. Where a play would be taken and then it would simply be adapted to an opera. It never occurred to me to begin with a literary product and then turn it into a musical theater product. That's not the way that the theater that I came from didn't work with text to begin with.
So if you take your glasses off, they're easy to lose or break. You know, the phonics center has the answer to your problem. Contact us. It could be a balloon. It could center gives you 3 days and see if you like these workers. It could be a balloon. It could be very...
In the traditional one, if you look at the plays of Shakespeare, and much of the modern literature is modeled on that, you're talking about the identification of the audience with the hero. It depends on a certain confusion of mind, actually. You have to get yourself mixed up with Hamlet. You have to say, well, that's me, somehow his like me or I am him, and whatever happens to him happens to you, and the epiphany of the work becomes when the tragic flaw of the character is revealed, and there we are stuck with him, and it becomes our tragedy. This, I call it a kind of confusion, because in fact we walk out of the play. We're no closer to being Hamlet after the play than we were before. But in the course of the evening, we've managed to get ourselves in this state of mind. I would say that the kind of theater that we've been talking about does not operate on that mechanism. Something else happens. And it's quite an interesting experience. First, I would describe how it happened to me the first time. I remember working on a piece called Comedy by Beckett. It's a play about 3 people who are dead, and they're in errands, and they're speaking from the afterlife somehow. I saw it many times, and what I noticed was that the emotional high of the evening would happen every night in a different place. Now, if I were looking at a play of Shakespeare, it would happen every night in the same place, if it were well done. And I was very curious, why should that happen? That every night when I watched this play, the epiphany of the play happened in a different place. And I finally came to the conclusion. What was really happening was that the mechanism had not to do with my getting involved with the piece, but being separated from the piece. And I would say that a lot of the modern theater that we're doing depends on something like that.
So you know they don't make clothes for people who wear glasses. There's no pockets anymore, so if you take your glasses off, they're easy to lose or break. New York Phonics Center has the answer to your problem. Contactless lenses and the new soft lenses. The center gives you 30 days and see if you like it. And if you like it, and if you don't, they could refund your money except for the examination fee. So if you're tired of wearing glasses, contact New York Phonics Center. For sight with no hassle, please call BR95555. Do you know they don't make clothes for people who wear glasses? There's no pockets anymore. So if you take your glasses off, they're easy to lose or break. New York Phonics Center has the answer to your problem. Contactless lenses and the new soft lenses. The center gives you 30 days and see if you like it. And if you like it, and if you don't, they could refund your money except for the examination fee. So if you're tired of wearing glasses, contact New York Phonics Center. The center gives you 30 days and see if you like it. And if you like it, and if you don't, they could refund your money except for the examination fee. So for sight with no hassle, please call BR95555. BR95555.
In the universe according to Einstein, the context in which an object is placed determines how we see it.
In making Einstein, I thought about gestures or movements as something separate. And then I thought about light as, again, something separate. And then the decor, the environments, the painted drops, the furniture, and they're all separate. And then you take all of these screens of visual images that are layered against each other, and sometimes they don't align either, or sometimes they do. If you take a Baroque candelabra and you put it on a Baroque table, that's one thing. But if you take a Baroque candelabra and you place it on a giant rock, that's something else. And maybe it's easier to see the candelabra when it's on a rock than if it's on the table. And in this theater, it's about that. It's how do we see? How do I see the rock and how do I see the candelabra? And then how do I hear?
Robert Wilson's conception of theater is rooted in the visual arts. When he came to New York from Texas in 1962, he came to study architecture, not theater.
I went to Broadway and I hated it, and I still hate it. And when I went to the opera, I hated it. I still hate it. And then I saw Balanchine's work and I liked it, and I still like it. And then I saw Merce Cunningham and John Cage's work and I liked it, and I still like it. So that was the first big influence, I think, on my work. At that time, I wasn't thinking about working in the theater at all. But in looking back now, that was the first major influence. And the second big influence was when I adopted this a 13-year-old black deaf mute child who was living in New Jersey, had come from Alabama and Georgia. And he didn't know any words, and I thought in terms of words. And I thought he was intelligent, and I learned that, I came to realize that he thought in terms of pictures and signs and signals, and that's how he thought about things. So my first big work was made with him, The Deaf Man Glance, which was 7 hours long in 4 acts and was completely silent. It was, as the French said, they called it a silent opera. And I thought that was a very good way to describe it because it was structured silences. And then the next big influence was when I met Christopher Knowles, a 13-year-old child who was living in an institution for brain-damaged, brain-injured children. And he was preoccupied with mathematics and geometry, especially, and with language. And the way he was arranging words and sounds was not unlike Mozart. And that there were classical compositions and things placed not arbitrarily, but for content of the language, but also very much for the sound and how the sound was structured. And that's when I introduced words in my play. I asked Chris once here in this apartment, I said, Chris, who is Einstein? And he said, I don't know. I said, Chris, who is Einstein? And he said, I don't know. I said, Chris, who is Einstein? He said, I don't know. I said, Chris, who is Einstein? He said, I don't know. I said, Chris, who is Einstein? He said, I don't know. I said, Chris, who is Einstein? He said, I don't know. I said, Chris, who is Einstein? He said, I don't know. I said, Chris, who's Einstein? He said, I don't know. I said, Chris, who is Einstein? He said, let me think. And then he wrote 12 chapters, and he gave them to me a couple of days later. And it went something like, will I get some wind for the sailboat? And it could be these 4 ideas. It could be Frankie, it could be Johnny, it could be a balloon, etc.